Hello, dear colleagues, dear friends and the fans. This is the second day of our conference, and I paid attention to the fact that the word which we heard most frequently yesterday was wonderful. We had wonderful speeches, wonderful comments, wonderful interpreters, and I'm sure that day 2 of our conference will be as wonderful as the previous one. So, first, before I move to our round table, I would like to remind a huge request to all of the speakers, please keep to the timing, to the regulations. If you need to speed up your speech, please don't do that, because it is really hard to interpret you properly, to provide simultaneous interpretation. Besides that, let me remind you that we have the function of interpretation. To activate it, you need to push the button of globe at the bottom panel and to select either Ukrainian or English channel. If you don't choose any, then you will just hear the original, the speeches in the original language. So, our first round table is named New Themes and New Challenges in Ukrainian Education. I'm so happy to introduce Hanna Bondarenko, the candidate of Historical Sciences and from the International Education Institute of Karazin Kharkiv National University. Her scientific favorite topics are history, the history of her motherland and traditions of Kharkiv in the context of multinational cities in the industrial and post-industrial era. Hanna is working with the foreign students, and her today's topic is problems of integration of foreign students into Ukrainian society. Hanna, the floor is yours. Hello, dear participants of the conference. I would like to thank the organizers of this wonderful event. First of all, Sarah and Svetlana, for such an opportunity to share my research, and separately I'd like to thank the interpreters as well. So just a moment, let me share my screen. Do you see my presentation? Yes, we do. Okay, thank you. So, the topic of my speech is problems of integration of foreign students into Ukrainian society. In the conditions of globalization, foreign students have become a noticeable factor in social development. In particular, it is about enriching the cultural diversity of local communities. Obviously, these students are seen as a resource because they provide financial income to the host countries. After graduation, they can become an important influencing factor, providing a connection to the country where they received their higher education. At the same time, the behavior of foreign students can become a cause for concern on the part of local society. In some cases, there is a tendency towards closedness, cleanliness in their environment. This is partly due to the fact that in the process of adapting to new learning and living conditions, they face language, academic, and socio-cultural problems that are not so easy for them to overcome. As of 2021, in Ukraine, we had more than 75,500 of foreigners from 155 countries of the world, and about 400 Ukrainian universities provided higher education to foreign students. Kharkiv University, named after Karazin, took first place in terms of the number of foreign students studying in Ukraine. Until the quarantine year of 2020, 1,000 foreign students studied only at the first year of the medical faculty of Kharkiv National University. However, in the 2021-22, this figure decreased insignificantly, approximately 900 first-year students. Of course, under the conditions of the war, the number of foreign students in Ukraine decreased sharply. Some universities stopped accepting them altogether. However, we are sure that after the war, the development of higher education in Ukraine will be impossible without the involvement of foreign students. Therefore, in our opinion, the discussion of the problems of adaptation and integration of foreign students remains a very urgent task. During the preparation for the speech, I familiarized myself with the resources of the Indiana University Library, which allowed me to better clarify both the theoretical foundation of the problem and to work out the practical experience that is analyzed in scientific studies directly directly devoted to the adaptation and integration of foreign students. So, adaptation in anthropology is an individual's response to new environmental factors, which operates at different cultural levels through behavior and social organization. The term integration is more fundamental and characterizes the way in which the units of a system are interconnected. So there are lots of works on this topic, and you can see some of them on the slide. While studying these works, I tried to understand how different are the problems of adaptation of foreigners in the USA and in Ukraine. It should be said that the most important problems are the same, and they are related to household, psychological, academic, and socio-cultural adaptation. Let's emphasize that the language component concerns all aspects of adaptation, significantly influencing the formation of successful communicative behavior. It is clear that all adaptation problems are related to the need to adapt to new life circumstances, such as a different time zone, a different climate, different living and domestic conditions, different food, different medicine, a different language, other traditions and norms of behavior. Data obtained by psychologists most often indicate easier adaptation of students whose culture is close to the culture of the host region. It is also proven that older students adapt better and women adapt better than men, etc. During the socio-cultural integration of a foreign student, we see active learning of another national culture while preserving his or her own national identity. Integration into a new cultural environment is the main indicator of successful adaptation, that is, any integration is impossible without prior adaptation. The term social integration, according to the definition, can mean, among other things, both order and conflict, both harmony and contradiction. So today I want to talk about the contradictions and conflicts that arise in the process of integration of foreign students. Researchers of the processes of human adaptation in society note that the adaptive situation includes protective mechanisms that prevent changes, that is, there are barriers to adaptation. For the subject of the adaptation process, in our case foreign students, such barriers can be worldview, psychological state, limited information, ignorance of culture, traditions, norms of behavior. This is the kind of option when the foreign students themselves notice in the new environment only what is different from their native one. When they refuse to look for commonalities, and as a result this approach leads to a reluctance to understand or even deny the values and behavior of the local population. However, the repulsion factor can be the local society itself, which shows intolerance, prejudiced attitude towards foreigners, xenophobia, emphasizes interethnic and interreligious contradictions and conflicts. These problems are also reflected in scientific literature. On the slide, you can see a list of such studies. However, today I want to dwell on the problems of integration of foreign students caused by such external factors related to the local environment. In 2020-2021 academic year, I conducted an anonymous survey among foreign students studying at Kharkiv National University, named after Karazin, and a total of 79 students who have different experiences of living in the city of Kharkiv took part in the survey from 1 to 6 years. They anonymously filled out the electronic questionnaire in English. Respondents were asked 30 questions about the problems of perception of foreign students by the local population, about the safety of the city of Kharkiv for foreigners, about cases of crimes or hate incidents, etc. By age, the respondents make up the group from 17 to 30 years old, but the majority are students aged 20-22 years. By gender, 45 male students and 34 female students took part in the survey. By country of origin, students were distributed as follows in descending order of number: India, Iran, Turkey, Nigeria, Israel, Morocco, Tunisia, Palestine. The largest number of respondents had lived in Kharkiv for 2-3 years at the time. The importance of the problem of adaptation and the relevance of this study is confirmed by the fact that the answers of some students, even despite the anonymity of the survey, are full of sense of threat and apprehension. For example, I quote, "I'm still afraid to answer these questions," or "I will be able to answer when I finish my studies. I can't answer right now because I'm still learning." To the question, have you experienced a prejudiced or negative attitude attitude towards yourself that had an ethnic, racial, religious basis, the answers were distributed as follows. 12 people, 15% of respondents, answered that such a negative attitude was observed very often. 55% said that this happened, but only a few times. 30% of respondents answered that they never had such attitude towards themselves. It is noteworthy that the majority of respondents noted that they encountered prejudiced attitudes in the form of reluctance of Kharkiv residents to communicate with foreigners, reluctance to help, humiliation, threats, physical violence. 21% of the interviewees identified a different prejudiced attitude towards them. It is indicative that physical violence was experienced only by boys, students from India who have lived in the city for 3-4 years. The vast majority of respondents answered that they had no conflicts with the local population, 62 students, and 16 students answered positively. And all of those disputes took place with the students from India, Turkey, and Iran. The answers to the questions, did the police help, and why did you not contact the police, were quite eloquent. For instance, the answer of the students from India, because the first time it happened, the policeman laughed and insulted us, mentioning that we should return to our own country. So what's the point of calling the police when we know they won't help? Or the answer of the student from Turkey, because they don't help and they end up blaming foreigners for everything and taking money from us to solve a fake case. Or the answer of the student from Nigeria. Senior foreign students advised us not to contact the police. And as well as the most common answer, they will not help. Unfortunately, the answer to the question, have representatives of the authorities or the police demanded money from you, is quite indicative. 39 students answered yes. So a similar situation can be observed with the question, do you consider Kharkiv a safe city? 68 answered yes, and 48 would recommend the city for studying and living to their acquaintances and friends. Of course, this is explained by each person's different understanding of the level of security, which comes from their own experience of the perception of security, which was formed even in the country where the students came from. The students' answers to the following question were extremely interesting. In your opinion, how exactly should residents of Kharkiv treat foreigners? Here are just a few examples. Student from India said, Kharkiv residents need to be tolerant with people who behave well and be intolerant of racism and prejudice. A student from Nigeria said, they should treat us as people, not foreigners, then everything will be fine. A student from India, treat us as your people, your children. They know that we are here alone without our families. There must be mutual respect. Student from Nigeria, stop saying foreigner. We are like you. Skin color, language shouldn't separate us. Student from Jamaica said, to be more hospitable because we are overcoming many obstacles in a foreign land. Kindness will always be appreciated. As well as the most popular answer of respondents, learn English. So, as certain conclusions, we can say that in Kharkiv, the most prejudiced attitude towards themselves is felt by people from India and African countries, which confirms the thesis of bias towards ethnic minorities that are non-traditional for Ukrainian society, which often differ from the general population in their appearance. It is indicative that students who have lived in the city for about 1 year wrote about the absence of inter-ethnic conflicts, while students who have lived for 3 to 4 years note that they have become witnesses or participants in inter-ethnic conflicts, and according to the survey conducted, clashes and incidents with foreign students occur in the city of Kharkiv, while the rates of physical violence, threats and harassment have slightly decreased. Foreign students are still afraid to contact the police, as they are afraid they won't be understood. Well, of course, they have some negative experience, and one more example, if we need help, the police always claims money from us, so we are more afraid of police than of robbers. Despite some negative experiences, the vast majority of respondents answered that the city of Kharkiv is safe for foreigners. Its residents are quite tolerant, and respondents can recommend the city of Kharkiv for living and studying to their relatives and friends. Interethnic conflicts occur in Kharkiv. However, most often foreign students encounter cases of fraud and bribery, extortion of money, overcharging for foreigners, household problems that are difficult to solve due to the language barrier and just not knowing of local regulations or laws, lack of inscriptions in English in public places, unfriendly and prejudiced attitude from the local population. On the basis of the conducted survey and monitoring of the investigated issue, I tried to single out the most important subjects and needs which are connected with the successful socio-cultural integration of foreign students into Ukrainian society. The first, improvement of state and local legislation and mechanisms for the protection of the rights of foreign students in Ukraine. Overcoming arbitrariness and xenophobia on the part of police officers, increasing trust in it among foreigners. Foreigners are forced to solve problems on their own. The need for special centers of free help and support for foreigners, especially students who are far from home. The need for joint cultural and educational citywide sports events with the involvement of foreigners and city residents. Improving the work of local mass media, which unfortunately mostly do not contribute to the establishment of intercultural communication and religious tolerance in the city. Ignorance of the city residents, which is manifested in ignorance of the English language as the main means of communication with foreigners, and ignorance of the real situation and life circumstances. I know English, said one student from Iran, but most people here do not understand English. I feel that I'm speechless, and no one can understand how I feel here. Just talk more, said a student from India. Talk to us more, because it's good that we spent almost 6-7 years here. We want to make at least some friends in this beautiful country. Yes, the language barrier creates ignorance and prejudice towards other cultures and languages. Thus, the conducted study proves that the process of adaptation of foreign students in Ukraine can be improved by improving the local environment itself. It is primarily about the development of a humanitarian policy with the aim of forming a non-conflict identity. Acquaintance with the experience of adaptation of foreigners in the USA convinces that the creation of appropriate mechanisms of intercultural communication can significantly improve the situation in society, including higher education institutions can and should play an important role in this regard. Thank you for your attention. Wonderful, Hanna, and we thank you for sticking to the time limits. Thank you so much. So the next speaker is Mr. Roman Borysov. He's the candidate of sociological sciences. He's also from the cohort of the intellectuals of Kharkiv University. His scientific interests are history and sociology, sociology of education, sociology of youth, history and theory of social criticism, professional socialization of students' youth, and a very relevant topic which he has today, the educational trajectories of Ukrainian school children refugees, factors, barriers, and opportunities. Roman, the floor is yours. Thank you. Thank you so much, dear colleagues. Thank you, dear organizers, for such a wonderful opportunity to be present and to tell about my research, and altogether I thank you for the support of Ukrainian science. So now let me share my presentation, and I hope that you will see it. The presentation will be done in Ukrainian, but I will tell the key points, and I do hope I won't be too quick for the sake of the interpretation. So, the topic, as it was mentioned by Svetlana, is very hard, and personally for me as well, because in spite of already a year passing by of this issue emerging, it is still very relevant. Though many Ukrainians have come back home in summer or during the fall, the statistical data which is collected by the Commissariat of the UN Commissariat and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees witnesses that more than 8 million are still in European countries. Coming to the educational issues, according to the data of the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine, more than 500,000 of people, more than 500,000 of school children are also in the European countries. And we will be speaking about that more. The data, unfortunately, is just as of December 2022. We don't have the new data, but I think that so far there is no significant shift as of March. So the methodology of the research itself. During 3 months, I was conducting the deeper interviews, first of all, with the parents of the school children. There were 11 of deep interviews. And why with the parents? Because at the time when they found out themselves in a strange socio-cultural situation, when they were in a different country, the parents themselves, as the research witnessed, and we confirmed it, they were the ones to take a decision about the further educational trajectory, about how and when their child will study. And also I'd like to emphasize that the research is still ongoing, and that what I will tell you today is more of a kind of a field notes, with the substantial conceptualization, some of the preliminary results, which I managed to separate in spite of a huge number of interviews. The selection formation method is the snowball method, and after the end of the collection of the information from the parents, I'm planning to conduct some of the interviews with the school children of the adolescent age. But about that, I will tell you a bit later. Who are the people who I'm interviewed? The people who lived in Kyiv, Odessa, and Kharkiv regions. They left Ukraine during the period of March to April 2022. That is the first wave of migration, and now they are on the territory of Austria, Germany, Poland, Slovenia, Finland, Switzerland. The years, that is the 4th year students and 10 grade students, and the educational trajectories, they are in the order of a number, I would say, of students. The majority of the interviewees, I can't say that this is just the pure majority because the research is still a qualitative, but still, 8 informants of 8 parents say that they selected a kind of a trajectory like simultaneous tuition in both Ukrainian and local schools. What the result was, we will speak about that a bit later. Then we have the daytime, in fact, studies in the local school and the remote studies only in the Ukrainian school. So when we are speaking about the formats of training and studies in the local schools, here there are lots of details, lots of countries where the Ukrainians are located now, and lots of details which concern the legislative framework as well, with the opportunity to be involved in the studies either directly in the usual school with the usual local students and school children, or adaptation classes. For instance, from time to time there was such a selection, an option to select, and as the respondents witnessed, some of the teachers and administration of the educational institutions were sending the refugees to adapt them as soon as possible and to take them from the adaptation classes as soon as possible to the usual ones, where they would study with the local children, the local school children and pupils. And again, from the perspective of the legislation, some of the countries could get to the usual grades with the local school children in the case if the students understood the local language at the level of A2 or B1. That is the average and a bit of lower than the average level.
So they are available in many countries, but when I've interviewed some of the informers from Poland, they in fact said that these adaptation classes are not widespread, meaning in small towns there's not always a possibility to select. For example, if we take a small city of Rybna in Poland, well, they don't have the adaptation classes. Secondly, in most cases, there's not only pupils from Ukraine, but from other countries. There could be refugees from the Far East, from the Middle East, from the North Africa, from other European countries. So that creates a number of misunderstandings, I would say. On one hand, there could be bullying cases. We didn't find any regular cases or regular conflicts or bullying or around bullying or with the involvement of Ukrainian pupils and the pupils from Poland, Germany, and other countries. But in the first period of time, there were some conflicts with pupils from Serbia and some other countries, but these were primarily politically motivated conflicts. Now, the main purpose for the adaptation class is to learn the local language and to adapt to the new school environment. Therefore, the curricula for these sort of classes is slightly smaller if you compare that with the one of the Ukrainian classes. So they study some local language, they do a bit of math, and that's all. And it's also because of the fact that there could be pupils of different age. So the age variability, the age range could be a couple of years, and it's hard to come up with the proper curriculum for them. The pupils can stay for 6 months to 1 year in adaptation classes, but the transition to ordinary school could take place earlier. That's in case if the pupils are capable or the students are capable of mastering the local language faster. Now, all of those conditions that are sort of simplified in terms of the training curricula, they produce a result that I would say was unpredictable, meaning the parents who can see that European schools offer do not significant amount of homework. So these parents think that they would need to maintain connection with the Ukrainian schools. And so they want their children to have simultaneous classes in the Ukrainian school. So going back to the adaptation factors, and they define uh, f- uh, the speed of the adaptation process. Now, what we can see on the basis of the results? Well, there's psychological peculiarities of the age, like junior pupils in the 4th year and to 6th year of study, they adapt faster, they find friends faster, they learn language faster, and they start behaving more or less confidently, also faster. Then there's language competences, and a lot depends on that. The level of knowledge of English and the level of knowledge of any local language. If the pupils were studying and if they have a pretty good level of English, if they studied English with the instructors separately, then they managed to find a different alternative option of how to communicate with the others around them. Now, the type of recreation, so to say, since some of the pupils tend to do some sports, music, attend music clubs, they had some achievements, and therefore the local clubs were happily welcoming them and provide them with additional recreation, and they found additional friends in those clubs. And you wouldn't need to have significant language skills in order to become friends with any of the kids around them. And the fourth factor, that's the support um, from the parents, meaning there is this concerned cultivation that's in the terminology of Annette Laroux, and that facilitates the proper cooperation with different agents or entities around. Then the pupils studying in the a local school, simultaneously they might attend the Ukrainian schools. And there's three formats. The non-simultaneous training, meaning after the classes in the local school, the students would go back home and do some test papers, some homework, and send those homework and test papers back to their instructors. So they receive the studying materials, and sometimes they receive video online records of the classes, but that's not always the case. Then there could be remote studying or online studying, but that is only possible if the Ukrainian class is studying during the second part of the day, meaning the classes starts at 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. Now, in this case, during the first part of the day, the students would go to local schools, and during the second part, to Ukrainian schools. And then sessional learning, but this is something that is offered by the private schools. The problems of the distance learning, we've identified a lot of them, but the key ones are on the slide. First, the thing that the lessons are being interrupted all the cases before because of the air raid alerts, because of energy shutdowns, and if the lesson is interrupted, it's not postponed for the later. So, in fact, the professors would tell the students which videos to watch, what chapters in the book to read. Now, the secondary school in Ukraine has 5 to 7 lessons per day. Now we have a situation when the online classes, there's only 2 or 4 of them per day, and the other classes are not being conducted. The other lessons are not being conducted online. And in some cases, there's no homework on those classes. So some schools, they have a situation when some of the subjects are disappearing from the curricula. This is something we need to investigate further on. And then another challenge is the lack of feedback. And in many cases, there's a situation when the students are sending the test paper and they receive a mark like 7 points, 8 points, or 11 points. That's from a 10-20 point scale. But there's no feedback in terms of showing what was wrong, where's the mistakes or anything they need to learn more, or maybe they should improve something. So this sort of feedback is something that is lacking. They're not being provided with that. Now, I've almost used all of my time, so I'm coming to conclusions now. First, the parents, they are mostly optimistic in terms of the assessment of the adaptation of their children. They're not saying there are any psychological issues. They're not reverting to psychologists. They're not registering the increase in the level of anxiety. Then some of the adaptation drivers, this is something that we could underline. There's psychological openness, the availability of the organized recreation, the active involvement of parents to the everyday life of the child. Now, if those characteristics are available, then everything is going to be better. Then adaptation barriers, the level of knowledge of the foreign language, then limitation of the free time. That's in case of double studying or double training in Ukrainian schools and foreign schools, and the limitations of the recreation infrastructure. The refugees coming to the cities of the foreign countries, they're in most cases they're coming to the small cities, and not always they're having a case they were having a possibility to go to the same sport clubs or other clubs they had back in Ukraine. The other is the trend when there is a sort of a creation of some sort of a ghetto among the students, meaning they tend to speak with other students of the same age, and of the same origin, and they slowly integrate into the local community. And then significant expenditures, educational expenditures, well, that's clear. Another problem is the problem of children in studying in the transitionary classes, going to the third or second or the third grade. Now, in summer, they would need to make a decision whether they should continue studying in Ukrainian school or whether they should try and integrate into the local educational system. Now, that completes my presentation. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Roman. Thank you for such an informative briefing. Well, it's very painful, it's very hard for our society, but it's important to mention challenges like that. And hopefully there will be a chance for us to have a discussion, to have a Q&A session with you. The other representative of the Kharkiv School is Oleksandr Zubarev, candidate of social studies, and he is very interested in the history of sexuality, the social and biological aspects of sexuality, psychosexual development of the personality, and many other aspects. And today, Alexander will have a briefing on the peculiarities of preparation and teaching of interfaculty course, Body and Sexuality in the Changing World. So, Alexander, please. Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me sounding clear? Yes. So, good afternoon, dear colleagues. I have to say that the time has passed surprisingly quickly from the letter from Sarah Phillips informing me about this Shevchenko conference, and that seemed a distant prospect at that time. And now I'm already delivering this briefing. It seems that the war accelerates the time when you're busy with something that connects you to pre-war life, and conversely, it slows down when you are concentrating on the war. And I'm very grateful for the ability to have this first option when the time is accelerated. So in my briefing, I will address the temporal dimension, and I will tell you about the idea of creating a course on the body and sexuality, and how it looks like, what's the status of that. And I've been dealing a lot with the further development of this course. I will also tell about the future of this topic. So, speaking about the origins of the course, it's all about the sociology of the body. That was the course offered by the Ida Kovalova and Yulia Soroka. So they are the professors of the Karazin University. Back in 2003, they developed a program and methodological materials for the course Sociology of the Body. That's for master students of the sociology department. So it was an attempt to contribute to the rehabilitation of the sociology of the body and the idea of the body as the subject of sociology, because since the time of Durkheim, it has been rejected as non-sociological. So that was the position of Durkheim. So he said that that was only the subject matter for the biology and medicine to consider. At the same time, we know that many sociologists reverted to the body as the product of culture, and they studied the body as the product of culture. We're talking about William, Marx, Simmel, Moss. That's the student of Emil Durkheim. So this program is a fairly interesting document. It's interesting from the standpoint of the development of this problems around the body, and the authors of this program, they argue that the body is turning from the natural phenomena into a social phenomena, and it is considered as the result of the influence of social relations, cultural values, and subcultural orientations, and it raises the problems of defining the body and attitudes. And the nature is being perceived as something that limits us as the social beings. It limits our perceiving abilities. It defines some borders for us in the world, and it underlines the problem of sexuality and death. I have to say that that was the first course on the sociology of the body at the department. It was very eclectic, and it's being eclectic, it's the characteristics of its course, I would say. So there's different topics covered by this course, like death as a sociological problem and some others. And since the topics of sexuality and death were central for this course, so I would consider this course as about the it was an attempt to went outside of the sociology discourse and to raise the issues that were never raised and discussed before. In 2018, we had a chance in the university to offer the interfaculty courses to our students. So these are elective courses offered for the second and third year students of all faculties. So the students can select any course they want, coming from the different faculties, from chemical, historic, sociological faculty. So that was an interesting opportunity because we would need to suggest a course that would be interesting for a wide range of students who do not have a professional sociological education. Obviously, the course of the sociology of the body was not suitable for this, as it was designed for master's students of the sociology department. And this is how we came up with the idea of the course Border and Sexuality in the Changing World. Then that would combine a broad philosophical approach, and it also underlines the sociological approach of Peter Berger, and it's all about helping the human to orient in this turbulent world. If we state this, then we think that the sociologist might help any human to orient in this world. Now, currently, the structure of this course is the following. At first, there's the wide philosophical problematics, the topic of the history of sexuality, and I'm trying to take some interesting aspects out of it. For example, the approaches to the issue of sex. And there is different approaches of Freud and Simone de Beauvoir. One is not born a woman, one becomes a woman. So these are absolutely different approaches to the same aspect. Now, it's important to show that both of the approaches might be correct depending on the context. So we might say that the war depreciates the life, but it devalues or depreciates the life of the man, or the anatomy is the destiny, or saying that women are actively engaged in the service, and then in this case, you're not born a woman, you're becoming a woman. Then the war devalues or depreciates the achievements that we had in terms of the idea of the gender diversity, but that's a difficult problem, a very debatable one. Then what other topics? The idea of Foucault, the idea of sexual freedom and repressive civilizations. So all of these are philosophical topics. Now I'm going to take some of the philosophical topics: the child-free, polyamory, LGBTQ plus rights, legal regulation of sexual behavior, then there's gender-based violence, adult as the socio-cultural phenomenon, and some additional reproductive technologies. That's the new topic that we have now. I'm currently working on that. And I'm very grateful that we have an access to the online library of the university.
Під час війни. Досить нетипово. Якщо,
It's
звичайно,
rather untypical because if it's mostly used when the person has some problems with health, for instance, to get a birth of
ми
the
знаємо, що
baby, now it is used to have an opportunity to have a baby, because we know that lots of the servicemen are now coming to the reproductive clinics to freeze their biomaterials, to go on with their ancestry. It's and weirdly interesting problematics because there are lots of issues which emerge here. As what does it mean? It means that this idea of going on from your ancestors to the future already presupposes the idea of your death, that your death may occur. There are lots of ethical problems emerging, that, for instance, there will be people born who are already doomed to be orphans.
вже,
Because
скажімо,
if there is no one of the parents, that is already partially an orphan. So the new children will be born not when their father died afterwards, but after their father already died. They will be born already. So how can it be understood from the ethical point of view? What does it mean? How will they grow? How will they be brought up? How shall we provide their socialization? Lots of issues emerge here. I will not delve deeper here. Then we have philosophical topics, in particular, sadism and masochism from Richard Kraft-Ebing, the philosophical interpretation of Deleuze, and also the language of the person in love in the modern world. This is the structure of my curriculum. I wouldn't like to take too much of your time. Let me make my speech shorter. So what are my conclusions when I was reading and lecturing this course? 3 conclusions as a teacher. Fragmentary character could be very useful today. It may be useful when we speak about the interfaculty and interdepartment disciplines. It can make the structure of the course very flexible. You can change the topics and no one will notice that. So this fragmentary character is very useful as the feature of this course, a functionality, a functional feature. We can add something, we can get rid of something, and responding the today's perception by the students. Then, students are co-creators of the course. The students are creating this course together with the teacher. Almost equally, 70% to 30%, I would say. This is the ratio. They are creating this course on a permanent basis. They're offering topics, they're sending suggestions and offers, they're filling out the Google forms, what we need to take into account and what they'd like to discuss. And the third is the syncretic approach. Ida Kovalova has spoken about that a lot. It is the following, that something can be dynamically and rapidly changed. Like the lecture is becoming a workshop, the workshop is becoming the lecture, the masterclass is becoming a seminar. It is a very active process of the teacher's activity. How much of time do I have left? If I don't have it enough, let me finalize. Yes, please finalize. Okay, so my conclusions. This course, in fact, is not so important. I am already reading it for many years, and I made a conclusion that we need a new one. I need to offer a new course which has the name, another one, not instead, but another one, Paradox of the Sexuality of a Modern Person. We don't have the sexology education at the level of the schools. We never had it before, and we don't have it still, and in the university as well, because it is accessible for the professionals, doctors and psychologists. The rest of the students don't have access to sexology education. There are some of the specific courses, philosophy of gender at the philosophical department and so on. But the issue is whether sexology can be the basis for the education. We say yes, it can. And how it looks like, the answer is Igor Kon. For the beginning, Igor Semyonovich Kon, for the beginning. And then we can develop his ideas. This is the argument that the sociology can be the basic science to base upon. So let me finalize my vision of the development of this topic in the future. The course of body and sexuality in the world which is changing has already been finalized. I'm writing the main topic. Maybe I will have the introduction devoted to males, and then I will be able to publish it. Then I'll have the course Paradoxes of Sexuality of the Modern Person. It, in fact, already exists. It will be even more fragmentary and relevant. This is two principles which I need to rely upon creating it. And the third course, where I will implement the in fact, consistency, interconnectedness of the science, will have this name, Sexuality of a Person, of a Human. I hope that my work won't be in vain. I thank the Indiana University. I would like to see the modern youth aware of their rights and respectful to the rights of other people, free from prejudices, protected by knowledge, healthy and happy. Thank you for your attention. Thank you so much, Oleksandr, for such an interesting speech, as you were very relevant, mentioning that some of the aspects are the challenge for our society, and this topic really needs understanding, thinking, especially in the context of the current war. Thank you so much. And I would like to introduce our following next speaker, that is Olha Maliarchuk, a candidate of economic sciences, the assistant at the Department of Business Economics and Entrepreneurship of the Kyiv National Economic University, named after Vadim Hetman. Olha is specialized in the innovations management, entrepreneurship ecosystem, corporate entrepreneurship, and cooperation between the universities and business. Today, Olha will be speaking about the entrepreneurship education in Ukraine, challenges of the post-war period. Please, the floor is yours. Good day again, dear colleagues. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of the conference for a wonderful opportunity to join today's discussion. I will be trying to be very short, laconic, speaking about the main spheres of the development of entrepreneurship education now under the conditions of war. Unfortunately, we don't see Olha anymore. Oh, I do apologize. Do you hear me? I do apologize. I had some of the problems with internet because unfortunately it is not stable now. My connection is not stable. So we can now say that the topic of entrepreneurship education is the development of entrepreneurship thinking, thanks to the shaping of certain skills and knowledge and expertise to transform certain potential ideas into precise and specific products and services. Of course, we can agree with the factor that entrepreneurship is one of the factors of economic growth. And in fact, it helps the creation of the new markets, products, services. And what's important for Ukraine now is the creation of the new job places and opportunities. I would like to emphasize the following aspects which are already impacting or will impact in the future the development of entrepreneurship education in Ukraine. First is the population migration. As of February 2023, according to the data of the Ministry of Reintegration of Ukraine, the census showed approximately 4.8 million of internally displaced persons in Ukraine, but their real number can be up to 7 million. The internal displaced persons are getting humanitarian aid from the people, food sets, clothes, but unfortunately it is not sufficient because there is a problem of adaptation and socialization at the new place. And what's the most important, finding the jobs. That is why there is the need of the curricula and the requalification, in particular with certain skills of entrepreneurship. If we speak about the external migration, Roman has already mentioned some of the figures in his speech. They are a bit different from mine, but still there is one commonality, a very important figure, that approximately 4.7, 4.9 million of people got the status of temporary protection in the EU countries. All the registered people have the right to access the healthcare, education, and also accommodation. But what's very important as well, they have the right of access to the labor market. As of December 2022, more than 1.1 million persons who were displaced from Ukraine found jobs in the European Economic Zone. Also, according to the UN data, approximately 77% of refugees, that is war migrants, are planning to come back. That means that potentially, as of today, under current conditions, that is approximately 900,000 Ukrainians can come back to Ukraine, according, to the new data with the new skills and expertise. They will need jobs and reintegration and also professional self-realization. So we even now have to develop certain projects, how to support such connections, retraining, and also certain projects which will help get additional income for the migrants, implementing entrepreneurship ideas. Because rather often during the beginning, when the war migrants or refugees are coming back, it's hard to find jobs according to their specialization or specialty. Another point we need to drive our attention to is the creating of the conditions for the entrepreneurship ecosystem, which will be also important for the development of entrepreneurship education. We are speaking about popularization and expansion of national values of entrepreneurship in the society through education and upbringing at different levels to disseminate entrepreneurship culture. As of now, in Ukraine, we have a huge number of certain initiatives for the development of youth entrepreneurship, in particular for the internally displaced persons in cooperation with the international partners. Undoubtedly, the youth is a progressive force which will provide the development of Ukraine of the future, but still it's an important component is also education for the grown-ups, for the adults. That is why adult learning, when we speak about entrepreneurship, such education should take into account the gained experience and professional competences. Here we need to create individual trajectories for the development of such types of education. And also, according to the forecasts of the National Bank of Ukraine, in 2023, the level of unemployment will be approximately 26-27%, only according to the official statistics. So we may say that we need those training programs and retraining programs as well. If we speak about the importance of the development of the infrastructure itself, it is necessary to mention that we need to work by two main spheres. The first one is the development of infrastructure of the entrepreneurs ecosystem, both in the universities, that is the creation of offices, transfer of technologies, business incubators, business accelerators, centers for support of the development of entrepreneurship, and altogether the innovative infrastructure within the country, that is industrial parks, investment, venture funds. If we speak about the conditions of the military situation and post-war situation, we need to pay attention that this category of population, which needs to satisfy professional adaptation needs, will expand. We are saying that with the aim of reintegration of veterans and ex-combatants, we need to gain experience of the foreign countries and open different acceleration entrepreneurship programs. Because in fact, the research witnesses that veterans, at least for 45% more frequently, are self-employed in comparison with the people who don't have military experience. So they have 45% 25% more chances to start up a business because of their personal qualities and gained military experience. If we speak about the next point, here we need to speak about the qualification of the teachers, the ones who will be working on the development of the curricula and retraining. And here, in fact, we don't need to invent a wheel. We need to implement the best foreign practices, tools, and approaches. If we speak about the educational sphere, thanks to the huge number of the support programs for the Ukrainian academics and scientists, first of the academic diaspora abroad, and the second wave is the support of different virtual or online programs, then in fact, as of now, this is a unique opportunity to gain new experience and to master new approaches in training. If we speak about the priority types of entrepreneurship activity in the post-war period, this is the manufacturing entrepreneurship. We may say that we'll need the development of the modern processing industry, which will be the basics of the competitive economy, and it will foresee the creation and modernization of already existing modern enterprises. So there is the need emerging in the training of the new experts on the economic of enterprise, a kind of a basic discipline for them. And also one more important aspect we need to pay attention to is to use the potential of social innovations to the max to help socio-economical development of Ukraine thanks to the innovative solutions. Undoubtedly, we will deal, and we are dealing with the global sociological changes. If we speak about 2020, the research before the war, Ukraine was a leading country of Eastern Europe in the sphere of IT outsourcing, which is quickly developing from the perspective of technical skills and technical infrastructure. Speaking about 2022, IT sector is the only sphere of Ukrainian export which increased in 2022. So the combining of technological innovations with the social innovations will generate this value added. And in particular, this is the new type of thinking, which is the following. Technical or technological innovations themselves are not enough. These new technological innovations and startups need to be created to satisfy specific global and social needs and to improve the quality of life. And the last point I'd like to drive your attention to is the maximum use and the development of entrepreneurship in the humanitarian sciences. We have already started the discussion of that during the last workshop in the program. I thank my colleagues that they were asking those questions because it's so important. This potential is not used enough, is underused, both when we speak about Ukraine and the countries of Eastern Europe, because it can become a kind of a key platform, a key basis for the recovery of Ukraine in the future. Thank you. Thank you, Olha, for highlighting of one more important aspect of Ukrainian education. Dear colleagues, we are grateful for such wonderful and interesting speeches. Dear speakers, we can come to the discussion. I'd like to remind you that we are planning to finalize our roundtable at a quarter past 10 Bloomington time and a 6:15 Kyiv time. So we plan to have a break before the speech of Mykola Repchuk. So please, your questions, dear participants, please. Olha and Maria, please, Olha. I do apologize. Do you hear me? Yes, we do. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't have a technical opportunity to hear the beginning of the speech of Hanna Bondarenko. Maybe it was already mentioned, but I'd like to clarify. This is very anxious statistical info which I heard, so I'm interested how long this survey took. Thank you. Yes, really. I mentioned that in the beginning, that is 2020, 2021, and of course, before the war.
Thank you. These are indeed very troublesome data, very challenging one, and we've got the research not only for the city of Kharkiv, but for the city of Lviv as well. Back in 2015, the main focus one was on xenophobia among the police officers and their attitude towards the foreign students. And unfortunately, some of the responses were of these students were very troublesome. If required, if that could be interesting, I would be able to send you with more details, with more references to the research. Thank you for the presentation. Just a short request. Most of the students, like 50%, they're coming from India. What happened to them after the war? Many of them went to Russia, and Russia was using the students of the medical faculty to shoot a video on how the assaults were taking place and how Russian forces were liberating the Indian students. And that film will be on Bollywood, because the Russia together with India shall be demonstrating a video on how they've liberated the Indian students on the territory of Ukraine. Could you have any comments on that? Well, why do we have the majority of the students coming from India? It's just that our students, the Ukrainian universities were very popular among the Indian students, and that's why they were the majority of students coming to Ukraine, together with the students from Iran, Turkey, and many others. Maybe it would serve like a small advertising. Very soon we'll have a workshop, more specifically on the 18th of April. I'll be delivering a briefing on the challenges of the international education during the war. So I'll be mentioning about the attitude of students toward this war, because I've run additional survey around among the students who faced with this war while being in Kharkiv, and what they've faced with, what challenges do they have. I haven't heard about this film, so thank you for this information. But the questionnaires that I've sent to the students also provide very troublesome information, because unfortunately there is xenophobia mentioned in their answers, and some of the controversies. Unfortunately, they were seeing even during the very first days of the evacuation. But more information on that will be covered during the workshop. I'll send you with the link to this video. Maybe, Maria, maybe you'll be able to send this link to all of us. Yes, I will find the link to that video and we'll post that. Well, because I didn't know about this video as well. I think that could be interesting and to some of our colleagues as well. Now, Hanna, your question. I have a question to Roman Borysov, because we are talking about common things, the problems with adaptation. And that's also a question for me. Like, how do you identify the success rate for the adaptation? Now, how can you say that there was a successful adaptation? Any indicators that could underline the adaptation, and that would allow us to make a summary that the adaptation did not take place, or there was an adaptation, or there was partial adaptation? Well, thank you for your question. Indeed, it's a very interesting one, but it's a very complicated on the other hand. I believe that we have to focus on the way how the proper relations are established with the classmates, with the professors, with the administration, and many others. Secondly, should we take some of the formal educations? That could be the success rate at school, but there could be challenges because the curriculums at schools are different. And in the course of the research, I have faced with the challenge on how and whether you can simply compare the quality of the European education with the quality of the Ukrainian education. Once again, I would like to underline here that I haven't talked to the students at this point, and I've talked only to their parents. So that would be kind of a one-sided approach. And I keep hearing thoughts that the Ukrainian educational system offers more knowledge to the pupils, but on the other hand, it engages the students in a less extent to the educational process. It offers less extracurricular activities, because in any countries, in any other countries, there's a higher level of cooperation both in class and outside of the class. So this is something that is much more developed. It is much more sort of intensive if compared with the Ukrainian schools. But there's something else we have to take into consideration. Whenever we are comparing the quality of the education, the parents tend to focus on the things they know. That is the math, for example. The parents, it's hard for them to assess the level of knowledge at humanities, at biology or chemistry. And of course, for students, it's also difficult to compare the quality of the education in those subjects. And the other challenge in terms of the quality of the education that we faced with is that in some of the countries, the secondary schools have differentiation, meaning one schools, for example, in Germany, there are schools where there is a division of pupils starting from the 5th year of study, and there could be schools specialized in preparing for professional education or vocational education, and the parents were saying that there is a kind of a 2-year lagging behind, so to say, if compared with the Ukrainian schools. So, but if you take the other types of school, the real shul, if I'm not mistaken, that's the proper that's the way how it's pronounced in Germany. So in real shul, there's this sort of difference is it's non-existent. So there's a different approaches to saying whether Ukrainian system of education is better or is not. But I would underline the indicators of cooperation, the social and psychological indicators, meaning how the students behave themselves, how the students, whether they have any conflicts with the students of the same age. Well, you can also mention the formal indicators, but they're less indicative, I would say. We do have maybe the final question from Marta Nigos, please.
So sorry, it takes me a moment to unmute myself and start my video. Yes, related to the social psychological factors or indicators, as you say, I'm wondering if you also gauged parents' own anxieties towards their children's future, towards their children's education. I know you were focusing more on the students, but at the same time, we know that parents do a lot more worrying. And so if you could speak to that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Дякую, Марто.
I thank you, Martha, for the question. Indeed, we've taken into consideration these aspects, but as I've already mentioned, the parents, they are too optimistic in terms of their assessments of the status of their children and the conditions of their children. And based on the interview, it's hard to say whether the children are taking care about their future or they're worried about this their future. So there is a kind of a shift of information, and we need to overcome this shift by having a conversations with the teenagers and not with the parents. This is why I've mentioned that this is a continuous survey. This is an ongoing survey, but already there's some troublesome indicators that we need to focus on. Thank you, everyone. I think we've run out of the time of the questions, so I'm very grateful to all the